Welcome. You're watching Eye on Harvard, brought to you by In Time TV. I'm Ogan Gurel. We have a great show ahead of us. A very interesting guest with a fascinating career, actually a very diverse career. The title of our topic is The World of Commercial Real Estate with Michael Alter, who's head of the Alter Group, but we'll talk about quite a few other topics too. Let me briefly introduce Michael. He went to Harvard, AB'83. And he is president, as I mentioned, of the Alter Group, a nationally based corporate real estate development firm, originally very much in the residential side, but certainly now in the commercial side. We'll talk a little bit about that evolution and some of the innovations that the Alter Group has instituted over the years. It currently has about almost 7 million square feet of space in its portfolio, worth around $758 million. And under development around the nation. It has a major healthcare unit, and obviously with my healthcare background, that's of great interest. And commercial real estate, being intersecting with the economy in general, is certainly of a great interest. And we'll talk hopefully a little bit about those economic issues going forward. Also of interest, Mr. Alter is a prominent philanthropist with the City Year organization here in Chicago. And he's also the principal owner of the Chicago Sky, Chicago's WNBA women's basketball team, and some interesting perspective behind that as well. So welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
And we're really honored to have you. I did have a chance to see a very interesting, though shorter, Crain's Chicago Business interview. Talked a little bit about your philosophy and, as I mentioned, a very social, philanthropic almost approach to the WNBA and your other involvements. So I really want to explore those. I thought we'd talk in three stages, if you will. A little bit about the Alter Group.
Okay.
And I've had a chance to review some of the illustrious history and some really fascinating innovations. So we can go through that. And hopefully in the middle of the interview we could talk about the economy in general. Obviously top of mind for many people. And certainly, as president of the Alter Group, you're keeping your finger on that pulse. And then third, some of the personal/professional aspects of your philanthropic endeavors and other interesting work.
Sounds good.
So let's start with the Alter Group. It started with your father. It's a family-owned business. Yes. And there were a number of innovations. One of them was, and when I say innovations and or following trends ahead of the time. And one of them was the post-World War II residential boom. Tell us a little bit about how the Alter Group was involved at that time.
I think probably a better word is really a pioneering, which my dad was particularly excelled at. And one of the things that I think was most, one of the things we're most proud of was during the post-World War II housing boom, he was the first one to develop a housing for the African American community, and I was out in Markham, and one of the things he likes to talk about too, because he was also, I think, innovative beyond even, I think he understood at the time, using a celebrity endorser, which really wasn't done at the time, and Jesse Owens, who had just won the Olympic gold medal, was the one that he had hired, and didn't cost him very much money to do that at the time, to talk about in his advertising for the housing project. So it was a very significant thing at the time that there, prior to that, there really hadn't been new suburban middle-income housing available in the African American communities, and so that
was in the late 40s. And we're not talking about 60s civil rights.
It was the 50s.
Oh, the 50s. Yeah. But still, I think it's quite innovative for its time.
Yeah, it was, and it was, and I think probably the two words that most important in terms of our firm are being innovative and opportunistic, and we've always tried to do that, and as you said, trying to see where the trends are going and maybe be a little bit ahead of the curve, not too far ahead.
So it's interesting. I mean, right now you're really commercial real estate.
Yeah, we in the late 60s, early 70s, we sold most of the residential. It was mostly apartment buildings. The single family housing that we did also came to an end, I'd say, about the mid to late 70s, and we moved into the commercial real estate development.
Tell us a little bit about that transition. Obviously, in innovation, to the extent that you made those changes, what inspired that change in your
again,
firm?
I think that was more opportunistic. The commercial, being a home builder is a very sort of discreet kind of business, and it's there were a lot of people doing it at the time, and still are. And you know, you can be very successful at it. But my father, again, this was before my time, but saw the opportunity to do something a little bit more and a little bit different, with a little bit more opportunity, some more upside. And he began also in the suburbs, began to buy land out what was the hinterland in DuPage County. This was, again, probably the mid-'70s, before too many people lived out there, and he began buying large tracts of property where he believed the path of development was headed, and he guessed right, and so we began to develop some office parks out there, really the first of its kind, and that I think people now sort of see all the time, they don't even realize, but
Sure.
you know, instead of just having one building, office building here, another one there, I mean, these were large tracts of property that were developed just for those uses, and created a nice working place for people to be in a nice environment.
Is that what they refer to as the planned unit developments? Or
The
is that
planned unit development was a sort of a zoning innovation that allowed for that to happen. It used to be you'd zone one piece of property at a time, and it was again, something my dad pioneered, was to convincing municipalities that there was a more efficient, smarter way to do it, that you could take a large piece of property and zone the whole thing with what they call PUD, Planned Unit Development, which gave some flexibility within the zoning. So you didn't have to go back and get zoning for every building you built, but you had an overall zoning for the property that allowed certain different types of uses, maybe single-story office building,
Sure.
maybe a mid-rise building, maybe townhomes or what other things. Now it's extremely common. I mean, almost any significant development is a PUD. It just,
a lot of that came from what your father, Bill Alter, innovated or pioneered. So when you know, I travel a lot around the country, whenever I see those office parks, like the ones we drive by O'Hare, I guess.
Yep.
That's an offshoot, if you will, of that.
Yeah.
And then in the 60s and 70s, there were these office service centers or single-story developments that you innovated or pioneered.
Yeah, I think, again, we saw a need there, that there were, at the time, we had, and this, again, the economy was really beginning to grow in the post-World War II boom. You had businesses, traditional warehouses, and you had your traditional mid-rise or downtown high-rise office buildings, but there were a lot of businesses that were beginning to grow up and beginning to flourish that had sort of a combined use. They needed a certain amount of warehouse space, but they really weren't large warehousers, and they didn't need the cost to be in a fancier office building. So these single-story service center is another word for office buildings or flex buildings. You know, gave them the opportunity to be flexible. They might have, in some cases, as little as 10% office, in other cases 80% office, and it allowed a lot of these smaller businesses and growing businesses to be more innovative in their own way that they built their businesses. They didn't have to have the warehouse space in one location, the office space in a different one. And it's become very common now. You see them all over the place. Again, probably don't even...
We'll pick that up right after the break. Okay. We're watching Eye on Harvard. Michael Alter, our guest. Stay right there. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Michael Momando. You're watching the In Time TV network, where professionals save big time connecting with their community worldwide. If you're in the restaurant or hospitality industry, I invite you to tune in to Restaurant Talk, where you can email or call in questions, comments, or concerns. You may even be a guest on our weekly Saturday show. To see a recent tasty episode of Restaurant Talk, please tune in to www.intimetv.com.
When someone abducts a child, they're not about to advertise it. But we will. Sign up at wirelessamberAlerts.org to get free Amber Alert text messages on your cell phone. Help put a child abductor out of business for good. Wireless Amber Alerts. A child is calling for help.
Harvard. Our guest, Michael Alter, president of the Alter Group. graduate AB'83. Just before the break, we were talking about some of the innovations, or as you put it, pioneering initiatives, post-World War II home ownership, meeting the needs of the African American community, the planned unit developments, the office service concept center where you have a warehouse as well as office space and maybe some other elements together. In the more recent era, there's been a couple of also innovations around ready design. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, that grew out of the last or most recent real estate depression. We can talk about later whether we're in one now, but
yeah, exactly.
In the late 80s, early 90s, there was, as you may recall, there was a real oversupply of commercial real estate and office building in particular, and everyone stopped building office buildings at the time, and we saw an opportunity for, as that the economy began to grow, and the supply of office building remained low because of the banks pulling back and not lending any money in the little credit crisis, and but the demand was starting to pick up, and we saw an opportunity to do some what we call build-to-suits in office buildings, which means building a building for a particular tenant. That's designed for them. One of the things, though, we had done that for years in the industrial side, one of the first to do that with warehousing needs, but office buildings are a little different and a little more complicated. The users are maybe perhaps a little more emotional about what those buildings look like and how they're designed and whatnot.
As opposed to that warehouse.
As opposed to the warehouse guys who are all worried about just cost. Just
let the trucks come in. And
they want it to be cheap and operationally focused. And, but the office users are different, and we thought that in order to help them understand that product, there was because it had never really happened before. There was also a lot of concern about delivery, how is the building, they're going to get built on time and the way they want it, and so there's a great deal of uncertainty about that whole concept of a build-to-suit office building. So we came up with this concept called Ready Design, where we basically pre-designed several different prototypes of office buildings, and so when we would meet with a corporate user, rather than having a blank sheet of paper and saying, tell us what you want and we can do a build for you, we said, here are some buildings that we have. They've already been designed. We have the drawings. They're ready to go. We can certainly tweak them for you, but we can tell you exactly how long they're going to take to build, exactly how long it's going to, or how much it's going to cost. In some cases, the fact that the drawings were done, we can save a considerable amount of time in terms of delivery. So it was a way to get them comfortable, to take away some of the risk and uncertainty on their end of committing to doing a build-a-suit project, and it worked very well for us especially during the mid '90s when the commercial real estate was just getting out of that recessionary time.
So that's fascinating, actually. Maybe we'll just digress a little bit. So that would almost seem to imply that companies had a certain personality and they wanted to reflect that. And I don't want to simplify, but did you have kind of the hard driving template and the softer, relaxed template?
Well, I wouldn't say that. They were more functionally differentiated. They were different floor plates for different size companies and different ways that companies might want to operate. Some of them, for a corporate user, for example, would have maybe fewer employees. They have more built-out office spaces, and may have other needs.
Call center may have more cubicles.
Exactly. More cubicles, more parking, bigger floor plate because they're trying to get more people on a per square foot basis. So it was more functionally driven than aesthetic. Although we tried to give as much flexibility on the aesthetic side as well.
The reason I say that, you had mentioned that people are a little more psychologically invested in office buildings,
for sure,
but not to the extent that personalities.
Well,
there's a little bit of that always.
For corporate headquarters, for sure.
Yeah.
And then they'll probably want to hire a well-known architect and do something different than they might want to do for a call center, for a back office requirements, or for a regional office even.
Maybe if we have some time later in the discussion, we talk about your favorite corporate or commercial real estate buildings from an aesthetic standpoint. But let's go to another innovation, enterprise solutions, which has been implemented or initiated very recently.
Yeah, that was a new concept we've just developed, and it really grew out of our sense of and we may, in this place, we'll see whether we're a little late because of the credit crisis we're in right now. But there was, money was fairly easy. There was, we found with small, medium-sized businesses, an increasing desire to own their own real estate. But there wasn't really the expertise to understand how to go about doing that, and to really appreciate the difference between leasing and owning, and how to evaluate those costs. And these tend to be people who own their own businesses, but in some cases they see the real estate as a diversification, and they don't necessarily want the business to own it, but maybe the owners of the company may have a separate entity that would own the real estate. So again, we thought it would be helpful to them to put together something that we could help them evaluate those alternatives, to show them how we could provide them with a quicker delivery, and again take away some of the uncertainty that might be involved in owning versus leasing. So as you said, it's still fairly new. I think the jury's still out on our success. We think it's a pretty interesting product, and we still think that there's a lot of desire to own real estate, even though that today is not, from a credit point of view, the best time to be moving forward, perhaps. But we still think there's going to be some good opportunities with that.
Well, the enterprise solutions is interesting. As you mentioned, small to medium-sized businesses, but it sounds like it's geared particularly to entrepreneurial businesses.
Absolutely. Privately held businesses where...
And maybe not necessarily ultra startups, but essentially potentially early-stage companies.
Yeah. Well, it certainly could be. Again, it is definitely entrepreneurs who, again, they see some value in owning the real estate. It may be part of the business, it may be separate from the business. A lot of entrepreneurs are always juggling a lot of different things. So even someone who's just started a business and sees the opportunity of doing that, they were thinking, it'd be nice to own this real estate because it's a good asset to have, and it'll appreciate over time. And so while they're planning their growth, to look at that as an alternative.
Right. That's a fascinating trend, because during the .com boom, you had a lot of startups that just out of offices, sharing, cohabitating, etc. An interesting concept to explore. Maybe we could talk about that just after the break in the context of some of the overall economic trends.
Be delighted to.
Yeah. You're watching Eye on Harvard. Michael Alter, president of the Alter Group, is our guest. We're going to talk right after the break about commercial real estate, the economy, and really important topics. Stay right there.
No matter where you live, life in the oceans depends on you. To keep our oceans clean, recycle and dispose of trash properly. To learn what you can do, go to keepoceansclean.org.
Once they've outgrown their toddler seat, they're still not ready for adult safety belts alone. 4'9" is the magic number. Until then, kids need a booster seat. Make sure your little pumpkin gets there safely. Visit boosterseat.gov.
You're watching Eye on Harvard. I'm Ogan Gurel. Our guest, Michael Alter, president of the Alter Group, talking about the world of commercial real estate. The world of commercial real estate is obviously, even for those that are not necessarily in that industry, it's embedded in the economy. So I'd like to ask you a little bit, obviously residential real estate, the housing bust and all that is nearly on the front pages every day. But tell us a little bit about, just aside from all those economic issues, what commercial real estate is and how it compares to residential.
Yeah, everyone knows residential. That's obviously people, single-family homes, apartment buildings, condos, anything where people live. Commercial is actually a very broad word. It usually includes office, industrial, medical office, retail, all kind of fit under the umbrella of commercial real estate. It's really anything but non-residential.
Right.
It's sort of the easy way to look at it.
But it's a very different field.
It's very different. Say you're dealing with companies as opposed to individuals who are owning their own homes or renting homes, and so it's as you mentioned, a huge business, a huge part of our economy. I don't think people realize, but just anytime you're in your car driving anywhere, all those buildings that are around you, they're all owned by somebody, developed by somebody.
Sure.
And it's a very good business.
So here's the $6 million, perhaps more, question. As I said, residential real estate's front and center. What's happening in commercial real estate?
We are also feeling the effects of what's going on with, as a result of the residential bubble and what's happened. Some of it's direct, some of it's indirect. The credit crisis that is going on as a result of so many of the banks and financial institutions that have been burned by the whether it's subprime mortgages, it's now going into other sorts of debt instruments as well. It's affecting the banks and investment banks' ability to lend money and interest in lending money. They're all having some capital issues, and so their underwriting has changed, and this affects the commercial as well. The fact that the impact that the residential has had on the overall economy certainly impacts the commercial side. We have so many of our tenants in the past 6, 7, 8 years have been businesses that have ballooned because of the residential expansion. Mortgage companies, title companies, financial service companies, all who've done very well. Those people need office space, they need warehouse space. They have been fueling the success of the commercial real estate. Well, now they're not. They're laying people off. Some of them are going bankrupt. That obviously impacts the commercial real estate sector. So it hurts on the demand side. And then on the valuation of property, it's nowhere near as extreme as the residential is seeing, but as debt becomes more difficult to get, people are able, the returns that they get on their purchases are impacted by that, and so therefore it trickles down into what they're willing to pay for real estate. So it all has an impact. So commercial real estate has certainly not suffered as residential has, but we're definitely feeling some of the pain, and I think we're going to probably see that increasing in the next 6 to 12 months.
Sure. And that the credit crunch in particular, as you say, there's a direct impact. To some extent, has there been a differentiation, if you will, of the debt instruments? Subprime, obviously a big problem. Maybe commercial lending not as much, but it's still affecting?
It's still affecting. I mean, we don't have subprime type issues, but we have the revolution that took place in the securitization of debt that helped create the subprime.
Exactly.
is just as large in the commercial side, if not bigger. I don't have the exact numbers, but it's very common now for commercial loans to be securitized and pooled together. Their credit worthiness is better than a lot of the residential loans, but there's still a lot of concerns that have developed as a result of what happened with the residential sector in terms of trying to understand these debt instruments and trying to appreciate the value, and a lot of these banks are holding them and not quite sure what they have, and so it's just when there's fear in the marketplace, it affects everything, and it's not a healthy thing for anybody.
Warren Buffett said something about when people are fearful, that's when you really got to be careful.
Yeah.
I don't know the exact quote, but
no, I think that fear is one of the worst, because it just creates uncertainty and paralysis, and no one wants to do anything because they don't know what's going to happen. So to the extent, and we're getting there where the credit markets and the banks can start offloading or what the problem loans and writing down what they need to write down, figure out exactly what their problems are. Everyone will be better off. Right now, there are still a lot of folks who are concerned that they don't know exactly how many bad loans are still out there and how much worse it's going to get.
Sure.
So until that flushes through the system, it's going to be a difficult time.
We had Steve Kaplan. Professor Kaplan is on the show last week. He's the Neubauer professor at University of Chicago on entrepreneurship and finance. It was a great show that we had. And near the end, I asked him what's his outlook, and he's very much has his pulse on things and very connected and so forth. And he said, and very openly and genuinely, that he just doesn't know. And to some extent, I interpreted it as an answer.
Yeah. Not a good one.
Not a good one, exactly. It's still bad.
Yeah.
He didn't say it was bad or good. He just said,
I think that's the fear and uncertainty. That it's just, which to me is a bad thing. I mean, if people don't know, even if you know things are going to be bad, if you can try to quantify it and plan it, you're better off than not knowing, because that's the worst situation you can be in. I think it's going to be, 3 to 6 months to get through that period of fear and uncertainty where we do know where things are going. Once we kind of break through that crack, I think things are going to move pretty quickly. Because I think, fundamentally there's still a lot of liquidity out in the business world today, and the fundamentals are, in the commercial real estate, the fundamentals are very, very healthy. We don't have anything like the oversupply problem we had 15 years ago, but people need to get over the fear right now.
It's interesting. It sounds like there's a big, almost psychological component to what's going on. Obviously, with certain pockets, the housing bubble, etc. Those are fundamentals that were not right. But if you overlay the election, for example, and all that uncertainty, it's a problem for the economy.
Yeah.
We'll talk a little bit more. You're watching Eye on Harvard. Our guest, Michael Alter, president of the Alter Group. We're talking about commercial real estate, the economy, and a lot more interesting topics coming up. Stay right there. We'll be right back.
Today, we're moving faster than ever before. Even your ideal prospect will see your ad, click to your website, then decide to read on or read none in a mere 1 to 7 seconds. After that, you become invisible. So what's the answer? How do you capture and hold the attention of your target audience? In-Time TV. The In-Time TV network broadcasts industry-specific TV shows to the people who buy your products: surgeons, primary care physicians, dentists, podiatrists, chiropractors, hospital administrators can now watch live in-time programs on widescreen, on their PC or laptop while checking email. Shows can even be viewed on a cell phone during a train commute. In-Time TV is peer-to-peer TV that covers the hot topics in industries that you sell to. In-Time TV shows are broadcast worldwide via the internet, yet the cost of running a 60-second commercial is a fraction of what you'd pay for a display ad in a trade magazine. In-Time TV is what your target audience is watching.
Keeping professionals engaged worldwide.
Mom?
Dad?
How long should I wait for you?
If I'm at soccer practice.
What if something happens? Will you come get me?
There's no reason not to have a plan in case of an emergency.
Should we go to the neighbor's house?
And some extremely good reasons why you should.
Can you tell me?
Talk to your family about what you would do in case of an emergency.
Welcome back. You're watching Eye on Harvard with Michael Alter, our guest. I'm Ogan Gurel. A lot of fascinating questions. I want to now bring it back together. The Alter Group, as we said at the outset, is a very pioneering organization, as you put it, innovative. In my mind, I certainly see that. And then we're talking about the challenges of the economy. And not to give anything proprietary, but tell us what are some of the trends you see in the next year, next 5 years, maybe even 10 years?
Well, we despite the fact that the economy isn't wonderful, I mean, we're very need to be forward-looking, because our projects take a year to 3 years to get going. So, having said that, we do lag behind the economy as well. Though once the economy gets going, we tend to follow a little bit behind. But we haven't stopped doing what we're doing, because we know it's going to take a little time. And I think one of the things we've been really focused on that we're very bullish on is mixed-use urban development. And what I mean by that is, the cities, not all of them, but a lot of them, certainly Chicago and many others that we're in, have become very vibrant in the last decade, and people moving. The residential piece has been very important to that, with people moving downtown, becoming 24/7, and obviously where the people go now, businesses want to be there as well. And what we're seeing is some opportunities to do mixed use, which include residential, maybe hotel, office, as well as some retail, all together combined in one building. So these are some redevelopment opportunities we're looking at. We're doing down in Chicago. Also in Phoenix, we have a project that we think will fit into that model, and we're looking at something down in Orlando. So that's something that we are going to be increasingly spending our time on. The other thing on the industrial side, we do a lot of we call big box development, which is large buildings from 500,000 square feet on up, and these are the buildings that warehouse and distribute all the product that comes in from Asia or from wherever it comes in, and then gets distributed across the country. And we're seeing that increase in terms of the size of those buildings and the efficiency in which companies are able to warehouse their product with the taller ceilings and the way they're able to rack the systems that they have for storing the product. And a lot of it is growing up around the port developments, and there's been a lot of things happening across the country in terms of ports trying to increase their efficiencies and also to become more competitive with other ports to be able to attract the shippers who are bringing product in. So we watch that very closely and are looking to find opportunities around those growing ports.
That's fascinating. I mean, I have a background in science, and so in chemistry we have what's called a rate limiting step. To the extent that you have a whole sequence of reactions,
okay.
And it sounds like when you're doing these transport, you've identified the warehouse as a rate limiting step to some extent, and they're trying to expand them. Yeah. And it's an opportunity if you can meet that need.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I made the analogy.
No, that's
but
okay. I don't understand the analogy, but I'll take your word for it.
But it sounds like it's a weak link, let's put it that way. That's another way to put it. And the weak link means you need to have these new paradigms for warehousing.
Right. Well, in our world of competitive globalization, everybody is always looking for an edge, for an advantage, for a way to cut costs, to be more efficient. And moving product, the whole business of logistics has become a huge business, and there are the top companies are people who are studying where they can save a little bit and how they move product by truck, by plane, by ship. It's a lot of billions of dollars involved in those decisions that are being made, and so there's constant innovation and changes going on in terms of how to do it and where to do it, and so the warehousing piece of that is very critical in terms of how it works and how a company can be more efficient, therefore be more competitive and keep their costs down so they can ultimately get to the consumer with the most competitive priced product they can.
And the fastest, too. Because as I understand, again, I'm not an expert, but I think that a lot of these warehouses are not just being centralized and bigger, but they're also multiple.
So there's this concept of just-in-time delivery, which maybe you're referring to, right? Which is to get the product moved as quickly as the customer orders it, and not to keep things backed up and take a long time. And so that's an important, with certain consumers, certain products, important marketing differentiator. The ability to do that can be critical in the difference between someone buying your product and not buying it.
Well, the example that comes to mind is Netflix. I'm not a subscriber. I hope that won't get me in trouble with them, but not that I need to. But I know their ad says we'll get the DVDs to you the next day. They can't possibly do that unless they're essentially a local warehouse.
Yeah, exactly. They've got to and have it all figured out very. And obviously the technology is very helpful in terms of how these companies are able to do that. The software that's available now and is phenomenal and helps make this all happen.
And there's, of course, real estate behind that.
Has to be.
So another angle to the question is, aside from those major trends, mixed-use development, urban, and then the whole industrial warehousing paradigm shifts or changes, what industries do you see as key to the future? I noticed that the Alter Group has gone heavily into healthcare recently.
Yeah, we're that big believers in healthcare, and we think that's only going to continue. You probably know better than I, but with the aging population, and also a longer living population, medical needs are only going to increase. There's the increasing competition amongst hospitals. I mean, our whole healthcare system is strained, and that's a whole probably separate issue for another different show with a better guest than I to talk about our healthcare system.
Well,
and
I think real estate's important. Part of the equation.
But we do need to fix our healthcare system. But I'm confident we're going to. But healthcare providers are all looking at, just as private sector, how they can provide better services at lower prices to their customers, and it's providing a lot of opportunities in the commercial real estate, in terms of everything from medical office buildings and where they're located and how they're designed, and something we've gotten into a lot that we think is going to be an important trend is wellness centers combined with medical office buildings, where again the hospital's looking to provide a larger array of services that includes not just the doctor's office and visits, but the rehab that may be involved, the care that goes along with whatever the illness is that people have, or that's something that the hospitals are trying to figure out how to keep involved in that and how to generate revenue from those as well, rather than having people go elsewhere for different services. So from a real estate point of view, back to that, we are designing and building some combined wellness medical office buildings that are multifunctional, and working closely with the hospitals on some of those. We think that'll be the trend in the next 3 to 5 years.
Well, I can't speak to, certainly I've seen the mixed-use urban, and I think it's a great idea in terms of accessibility of services to residents, not having to use a car if you're right in the city. That makes a lot of sense. I can't really speak to the warehousing paradigm shift. You can tell I used a chemistry analogy, but I can say with respect to hospitals, with increasing chronic disease and comorbidities, namely multiple diseases with aging, the concept of having a real estate glue for those multiple needed services makes a lot of sense.
I hope so.
Yeah. Well, we'll be right back. We're with Michael Alter on Eye on Harvard. We're talking about commercial real estate. We'll talk about a lot of other questions. Stay right there.
My pot of gold, your daddy's little girl, till heaven home.
It's easy to tell if you've had way too many. But what if you've had just one too many? Buzz driving is drunk driving.
Hey guys, thanks for coming.
Are we in trouble?
No, you're not in trouble. I just want to set some ground rules.
Like what?
Well, remember last week when you hit Vinny in the head with the shovel?
I do not recall that.
Of course not. Well, it was pretty graphic. Too graphic for the kids. So I'm going to have to block you.
I got to make this up to you. This is Vinny's watch, and I want you to have it. You deserve it.
Thank you. That's really not necessary.
No. Come here.
Welcome back. You're watching Eye on Harvard. Our guest, Michael Alter, president of the Alter Group, Harvard AB'83 government, I believe.
That's right.
Tell us, we're shifting to personal/professional. We talked about commercial real estate. We talked about the Alter Group. Tell us a little bit about that experience, perhaps how it has influenced a lot of what's happened subsequently.
Yeah. Well, I had a great 4 years at Harvard. I was actually there a fifth year afterwards, which I can tell you about in a minute. But my undergraduate experience was just wonderful. I had some incredible professors that I got to know. I made a conscious effort to try and take as few large courses and as many small courses as possible, which really gave me the opportunity to get to know a lot of the faculty well, and that was definitely one of the highlights for me. But all in all, I'd say the thing that truly stands out for me is just the other students who had the pleasure of being with while in undergrad. They're just as you well know, from everywhere, really diverse and talented and bright and just incredible. Stimulating and fascinating group of people, and that was probably for me the thing that I enjoyed most about my 4 years.
Well, I can speak to that. I mean, it makes it very easy to put on this show because you have a lot of people to choose from. Very interesting topics, certainly today included. So that kind of relates to some of your philanthropic efforts. I mean, we've spent a lot of time on the professional side with the Alter Group, but you're certainly a noted philanthropist in the Chicago area, in particular with an organization called City Year, which actually has some Harvard connections. So tell us a little about City Year first, and then
City Year actually, the notion of City Year, I should say, really began during our undergraduate years. Two of my roommates. So it came from those staying up all night talking about how you're going to save the world types of things that college students, thank God, tend to do. I hope they still do it. And Alan Casey, Michael Brown, two of my roommates, really got so passionate around this idea of national service that they decided after graduation, they actually went on to law school, but after law school that they were going to create a program that would be a model that could be replicated across the country, throughout the world, that would bring young people together, challenge them to serve, to give back to their communities, and provide them an opportunity to do so. And so it began, in those late night marathons, as I said. To their credit, in, I think it was 1988, so a few years after graduation, they put City Year together. Started with a summer program
in Boston.
In Chicago?
That
was in Boston, yeah. Which I was fortunate enough to be there when they began. And after a couple of years, they wanted to begin expanding it and asked me if I would help them get started here in Chicago, which I was more than happy to do. And it's been a huge part of my life ever since then. It's now not quite 20 years, but it's been a long time that I've been working on City Year in Chicago, and we've had, I haven't counted it up, but we've probably had 500 core members in the years that we've been here, and worked with tens of thousands of young people in the Chicago community. This year we have 100 core members. We're actually involved right now in a campaign to develop a growth strategy and how we can grow even more. Most of City Year, we have 17 to 24-year-olds who are doing a full year of service, and we partner with Chicago Public Schools, and one of our largest service projects is with them, where we're doing literacy training, and we really, Arnie Duncan, who's another Harvard grad.
You're actually a classmate of 86.
Oh, okay.
Hopefully we'll get him on the show.
Yes, you should. Wonderful guy, and he's trying to get City Year in as many schools as he can, and we want to do that as well.
Yeah, definitely.
But we need to grow, and we need to figure out how the best way to do that, which is a process that we're just beginning right now. I'm very excited about it.
Well, I don't want to delve too politically, but has there been discussion in this election campaign? I recall something being said about increasing volunteerism and even mandating it.
Yeah. Well, one of the wonderful things about the three candidates who remain,
I think they all talk about
exclude Huckabee. They do. They all talk about it. I mean, Bill Clinton was a huge supporter of, obviously, national service. He created the AmeriCorps program, and he really got the inspiration from City Year, which he visited when he was campaigning for the presidency, his first time, I think, in 1990. He had visited Boston and met with Al Michael, and really that's where he got the idea for AmeriCorps. Senator Clinton has been a huge fan of City Year, of national service throughout the years, and continues to be a champion. And Senator Obama has talked about it. A great deal of his message is the importance of young people and challenging them to serve, and how everyone can make a difference. And John McCain actually came to Chicago when we had a national conference here. Came to Chicago. It was a City Year conference called Syzygy. It was held at the University of Chicago about 5 years ago, and he was one of our speakers, and came and shortly after spending time with the core members at City Year, changed his view about AmeriCorps, because there was a lot of criticism at the time from the Republicans that this was not a real worthwhile program. And I think a lot of that was probably politically motivated. But Senator McCain became actually introduced a bill to double the size of AmeriCorps, and obviously from his service background he understands the value of service and how impactful it is, not just on those who are serving, but on those who they're helping, and has become a huge supporter and champion of the idea of service. So we're very fortunate that we have 3 candidates who I think are going to continue to push the envelope on service and to get young people involved, and not only understand, but understand what it means to democracy overall, to have people who are civically engaged, who are involved, and how that stays with them and those that they work with throughout their growth, throughout their development as adults, and has long-lasting impact.
No, it sounds like it, very eloquently stated, and certainly there's an uncertainty around the economy, an uncertainty around the election, but it sounds like with any of those 3 candidates, you're going to, at least in this regard, be okay.
I think yes, I think so.
Which is a good thing, because as you very nicely put it, I have heard about more about service. To some extent, with the turmoil that's going on, it hasn't been center stage, of course, but I've heard about it, and it sounds like it's going to be hopefully, as things settle down.
And again, not to be too political either, but I think a number of us were disappointed that after 9/11, that there was a huge surge of people who wanted to serve and wanted to, felt like to do it, and that as a country really didn't take advantage of that.
Right.
We kind of said, there was a counter sort of urge to just say everyone go back to normal.
Sure. And service was very defined in terms of the military, not necessarily a broader sense of community. You're watching Eye on Harvard. Our guest, fascinating discussion. Our guest, Michael Alter, president of the Alter Group, also director of City Year here in Chicago. Stay right there. We'll be right back.
Any questions?
No.
You know.
We're not magicians, we can't read your mind.
We use your questions, each and every kind.
What are the side effects, doctor, doctor?
How many times have you done this before?
Questions are the answer.
Will this react with my other medicine?
Hey, what are all these tests even for?
You have the power to say what's on your mind.
We need your questions, each and every kind. Questions are the answer. Questions are the answer.
Welcome back. You're watching Eye on Harvard. The final segment, our interview with Michael Alter, president of the Alter Group, director of Chicago City Year. We were talking about City Year, about community service, and really appreciate the discussion. I think it's something that at Harvard we, as you said, and hopefully colleges still, you talk about late at night how to do good and so forth.
Sure they do.
And it's very nice to see that come to fruition. I want to talk a little bit about some of, I saw the Cranes business video interview, and you talked about leadership styles, etc. I'd be interested, I thought those were some very interesting points. And I'll give some context. Steve Kaplan, in last week's, talked about good CEO characteristics. And he studied this very empirically with his team, and found, and again, I'm generalizing, and obviously you have to read the papers, etc., but that the hard characteristics, which doesn't necessarily mean obnoxious, but sort of hard driving, aggressive, gets things done, were more associated with success than the softer aspects, which doesn't necessarily mean weak, but by softer we mean collaborative, team building, etc. What is your perspective on that?
Well, I can't give you a macro view like that, but I can certainly talk from personal experience.
Sure, yeah.
And I'm definitely on the softer side. Our business, and that's why it's hard to generalize, but it's a professional organization. We have some really talented people, and we want to be very entrepreneurial and opportunistic, as we talked about earlier. And I'm a big believer in empowering people to do what they need to do. I think having a collaborative environment is very important towards that as well. You can't be. That doesn't mean you're wishy-washy or indecisive. I mean, quite the opposite. I think I'm one of my strengths. I think is that I'm very decisive about doing things, but I don't think you need to be hard-edged about it.
Sure.
Nor do you need to be hierarchical about that. I think people. At some point, you need to make a decision. You need to move forward, and just having people sitting around talking about stuff all the time is not. I don't think very good management or leadership.
Right.
But giving people the tools and the direction that they need to go in, and then letting them and supporting them and going in that direction, I think is I found has worked very well for us. It's very productive in terms of people knowing what they can do on their own and being able to do it. It's been one of our great successes, like any business, is the people that we have, and we've been incredibly fortunate to have people that have been with us, our top management team, on average 20, 25 years, which is unique in any industry today.
Sure.
But especially in the real estate industry, where turnover is not uncommon, and I think it's been a huge strength of ours. And I think a lot of that has been because of the culture that we have, and because of the opportunity we give people to grow, to do more, without having someone looking over their shoulder all the time.
Yeah, I recognize that, and I think that Professor Kaplan's articles relate more to private equity companies. There are different pressures and the earlier stage. But again, those are generalizations, et cetera, and certainly the collaborative approach is very important. You did make a very interesting comment about what characteristics in people you like or respect a lot, and one that you noted was ambition. And you specifically said ambition is not a bad thing, it's really good. How do you reconcile the ambition in your team with the team building?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are afraid of ambitious people, like if they find it threatening somehow or hard to control, perhaps. To me, ambition, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. Certainly, it can be a bad thing if someone is overly ambitious, and if it leads to selfishness, it's going to be a problem with team building. But I think if managed well and understood properly, ambition is a very motivating thing, and it helps people to be excited to come to work every day, to want to get the job done. And I think from a leadership point of view, the challenge is to help people understand that they can reach their ambitious goals by working with others, and not by trying to outdo them or work around them. And so I think to the extent that you can create an atmosphere where everyone is working together, then they'll be able to fulfill their ambition and get to where they want to be. But it doesn't have to be at the exclusion of someone else. So to me, there's certainly doesn't have to be any contradiction there.
Yeah, and I think that balance especially has to be in commercial real estate, because I think commercial real estate, to be frank, probably is not lacking in ambition. You have to have a certain ambition to build something. Certainly we have Donald Trump as an example.
Ambition, and we have quite a lot of individualistic type folks who are, but that's, again, that's part of, you want talented people, and you want people who have dreams and want to accomplish them.
But at the same rate, when Donald Trump says he built that building, he certainly didn't do it on his own.
No, he probably had a lot less to do with it than you might think.
Yeah, it's a huge team, so it's an interesting dichotomy. Yeah. You also talked, I also want to talk about something very interesting. You are a principal owner, I don't think the only owner, but the principal owner of the Chicago Sky Women's National Basketball Association team.
That is
the
true.
Local franchise. Tell us a little bit about, we have about a minute, 30 seconds left. How you get involved? What's that?
I'll go quickly. In essence, I didn't know much about the game. I had no ambitions to being in sports. But I met a couple WNBA players, not realizing that they were professional basketball players. And in a lot of ways, I was inspired by them the same way I am by the young people involved in City Year. And I've always believed in the transformative power of sports in terms of really changing our culture. We are a very sports-dominated culture. And what this league stands for, what these women stand for, it is pretty profound and really trying to force us to look at gender inequality in the women and women athletes, and really providing outstanding role models for young people, boys and girls, in ways that just I don't think exists as much as it used to. And these women are just truly inspiring people, and they play a game that's just an incredible game that I didn't really have any appreciation for until I got involved. They're the best women athletes in the world in this league, and the game of basketball, I think a lot of us, myself included, tend to think women are not going to be anywhere as good as the men. The game is different, but it's every bit as exciting and every bit as fabulous to watch.
Well, it sounds fascinating. We have Michael Alter. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
A wide range
to be
interview.
here.
We had commercial real estate, we had leadership styles, we had the economy, finally ending with the Chicago Sky women's NBA basketball franchise. We're watching Eye on Harvard. Thank you very much for being with us. See you next week.